The unit looked like it had been staged for a listing and never really lived in. White walls, gray couch that sounded hollow when I pressed it, a fern print framed over a TV I didn't plan to turn on. The app called it 6B Service Department, extended stay rates. I called it cheap and clean, which were the only two things I could afford. The keycard waited in a lockbox. Inside on the kitchen island, someone had left a cream envelope with the building's logo embossed in silver foil. House guidelines for your safety. Heavy stock, faint smell of disinfectant like it had been stored with bleach tablets. Cute, I thought. Hospitality theater. I opened it with a butter knife. 5 lines centered typed. Rule number 1. Do not leave your unit between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Rule number 2. Do not answer the doorbell or knocking after midnight. Rule number 3. Cover the bathroom and living room mirrors on the night of the new moon. Rule number 4. If you hear children playing in the hallway, do not open your door. Rule number 5. Never attempt to enter the basement laundry room. If the door is open, close it immediately. The kind of thing that wants to be viral. I set it under a coaster like I was pinning a bug and finished hauling my life in. 2 suitcases, a tote of cables, my laptop, the plant I keep pretending isn't dying. The air here had that hotel clean brightness, citrus cleaner over cold metal from the AC. When I took the empty suitcase back to the hall, the motion lights woke in a line ahead of me, half a beat late as if I was following someone I couldn't see. She was wiping a sprinkler head when I returned. Late 50s, navy cap, nitrile gloves, uniform cart stacked with towels and chemicals. "You're 6B?" she asked without looking up. "I am." Her eyes found the envelope in my hand. Whatever color was in her face folded away. The gloved thumb and forefinger pinched the cuff and twisted, a small, automatic wrenching motion. Then her gaze cut sideways to the ceiling camera and back to me, quick like a reflex. "You got that already?" she said. "Good." "It's a brand thing?" I tried. "Creepy cheek?" Her mouth pressed thin. "Just follow them." She nudged the cart. The wheels squeaked. Then she turned back. "Don't go downstairs at night. My name is Elena. Call housekeeping if you need anything." She left a thin trail of citrus behind her. I worked until almost midnight, installing my old routines onto a new table. The AC thumped, recovered, exhaled a flow of air so dry it stung the back of my throat. Somewhere in the ductwork, a metal panel vibrated like a low note on a string. It made the spoons in the drawer hum if I didn't close it all the way. This place had noises I didn't own. That was enough to keep me alert. At 12:37, the doorbell chimed, a hotel-perfect tone, warm, pleasant. My hand froze over the trackpad. It chimed again, longer, then a voice through the door. Female, the front desk cadence of someone trained to be helpful. "Good evening, Miss Carter. This is reception. We need to reprogram your keycard. Could you open the door for a moment?" I hadn't given my name to anyone here. I picked up my phone, opened the camera, and walked to the peephole. The hallway was what hallways are at night. A red exit sign, a carpet pattern that makes you seasick if you stare, a ceiling grid full of cheap LEDs and stale air. No one in frame. The motion light above my door woke, flickered, slept, then woke again, as if something moved through it and then stopped. "Miss Carter," the voice said, closer to the wood now, very normal. A polite knock, knuckles on veneer, followed by, "We can see your light under the door." My lights were off. The only glow in the unit was the laptop screensaver, a slow drift of color like a jellyfish. I looked down at the bottom of the door anyway. A hairline of brightness traced the threshold. But the light was wrong. It leaked from the hallway side. A thin bar like a phone flashlight laid flat on the carpet just inches from my toes. I slid the chain across and let the metal click on purpose. I watched the peephole until my eye watered. Nothing. The motion light still pulsed as if breathing. The AC lifted and fell. A faint, clean ozone note threaded under the citrus, the smell that follows a spark. My tongue tasted metallic. "I'm sorry," the voice said after a while, disappointingly sincere. "If you could just—" It stopped. The bell didn't ring again. The brightness under the door thinned to nothing, like someone cupped a hand over their light. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening to my own breathing try to outrun itself. When I finally backed away, I did it facing the door, slow, the way you do with a dog you don't know. I sat on the couch and rested my palms on my knees until the muscles in my forearms stopped buzzing. At 7 a.m., there was a card on the floor just inside the door, like someone had fed it through the mail slot with care. Same heavy paper, same logo. Maintenance hours, 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Quarterly thermal purge. For your safety, remain in unit. Underneath, in blue ballpoint, 2 words had been added in a small, careful hand. Please. The ink was smudged at the loop of the P, as if a gloved thumb couldn't help shaking. I taped the rules to the fridge. I didn't laugh this time. I made coffee and watched the motion lights through the peephole with the door still chained, because it felt like the kind of day you start by admitting someone else knows more about your home than you do. I came here to be left alone. The first night, the building learned my name and asked to be let in. And for now, rule number 2 was the only reason I wasn't. I woke with my ears screaming, like we were dropping altitude too fast. A pressure built behind my sinuses sharp, a cabin descending without warning. I swallowed hard. The pain popped, then dissolved, leaving only the buzz of the AC pushing air that smelled faintly of disinfectant. No flight. Just my unit. The dream had taken the building with it. Coffee burned my tongue. I sat at the counter and typed the address of the complex into every review site I knew. Most listings had 3 comments at most, all scrubbed, replaced with the same copy-paste language about convenient access to downtown and generous amenity package. But Google Cache still had fragments of older reviews, half-rotted in the code. One line repeated enough times to matter, made it 120 nights, sometimes with an emoji, sometimes buried in text about appliances, but always the same phrasing, 120. 4 months exactly. My stomach pulled tight. A knock interrupted the search. This one was ordinary, mid-morning, brisk. A man in maintenance gray leaned in the doorframe when I opened, tool bag over one shoulder, a Torx driver twirling in his fingers. "Filter replacement," he said, already scanning the room with that detached familiarity people in uniforms develop. "Richard?" I guessed from the patch over his chest. "Yeah." He ducked to the AC intake, unscrewing the panel. The Torx handle wrapped against his palm in a steady rhythm. "How's 6B treating you?" "Fine. Clean. Quiet." He grunted. The driver tapped again. "You ever hear kids in the hall here?" I asked. That stopped him. For half a beat the tapping ceased, then resumed. Softer, as if he hadn't meant to pause. "No," he said finally. "Walls are thick, soundproofing's decent, you shouldn't much of anything." I told him about the card slipped under my door. He didn't look at it. Didn't have to. "Don't touch the basement," he said flat, like reciting a safety instruction. Then he shoved the panel back, wiped his hands, and shouldered the bag. "Wait," I said. But he was already halfway down the hall, Torx clicking against the strap like a metronome. I went back inside with my pulse climbing. If Richard knew more, he wasn't talking. I opened every closet in the unit, searching for what the last tenant had left behind. Linen shelves, a warped broom, nothing. Then, behind the sliding panel by the water heater, I found a suitcase wedged sideways. Its handle snapped. Dust coated the zipper. But the tag still had a name in fading Sharpie, Kyle M. Inside, clothes folded badly as if stuffed in a rush. A half-full bottle of body wash. At the bottom, a flash drive wrapped in a receipt. I plugged it into my laptop. The folder held 6 files, all named with timestamps. The most recent was dated 3 months ago. I clicked. The video shook, handheld. Pointing at a corridor I recognized. Our floor, maybe 2 doors down. The timestamp at the bottom read, 2:29 a.m. The audio picked up a hollow, repetitive noise. Bounce, bounce, bounce. like a ball hitting carpet. Light but rhythmic. The camera panned, searching. No one there, only the corridor lights waking in sequence. One fixture at a time, flickering alive as if following an invisible runner. The bouncing grew sharper, closer, but the hall stayed empty. The camera tilted down toward the base of the door at 6B. The light strip across the threshold glowed faintly, not from inside but from outside. A sideways gleam rolling like water under pressure. The feed cut to static. I sat frozen with my headphones still in. In my memory, the dream pressure clenched back into my ears, a reminder of being forced down, unable to equalize. I pressed my palms to the sides of my head until it eased. Rule number 4 came back in a rush from the envelope I had taped to the fridge. If you hear children playing in the hallway, do not open your door. The file had no children's voices, not yet. Only that steady, hypnotic rhythm of rubber on carpet, stretching minutes into hours. My skin prickled. I ejected the USB and shoved it under a pile of clothes in the closet. My laptop screen reflected me faintly, washed out against the room's daylight. For a moment, I thought I saw another figure behind me, blurred. But when I turned the chair, the room was empty. Just the couch, the fern print, the hollow air. I told myself it was fatigue. I told myself the bounce was just a noise the building made. Then I remembered Richard's pause when I asked, the silence between Torque's taps. The way Elena's eyes had flicked to the camera yesterday, like it might answer for her. When night came, I checked the peephole again. Empty hallway, red exit sign humming. Still, I couldn't shake the rhythm from my head. Bounce, bounce, bounce. The sound you want to follow, because following is easier than locking a door. I killed the lights and lay down anyway, repeating the words taped to the fridge until I believed them enough to shut my eyes. Do not open the door. Do not open the door. But in the dark, the building was patient, and I knew rule number 4 wasn't written for nothing. The calendar app said it plain, new moon tonight. I pulled up the weather too, like that would matter. Some part of me pretending this was just astronomy, not instruction. Still, around sunset, I walked the unit, checking every reflective surface like it could betray me. The bathroom mirror was easy enough. I taped a towel over it, smoothing the edges flat. The bigger one in the living room was harder, floor to ceiling, a panel meant to make the rental look bigger than it was. I didn't own a sheet large enough, so I used the spare blanket from the linen shelf, clipped to the molding with binder clips. The fabric sagged in the middle. It looked temporary. The AC thudded on again. The air that poured out was colder than usual, carrying that faint chlorine sting that had been creeping in more often. My throat scratched as I breathed. I swallowed, and it felt like rinsing with pool water. I tried to keep busy, wiped down the counters, refolded the clothes I had shoved in the closet, stacked my books by size, but my eyes kept dragging back to the mirrors, to the blanket sagging like a cheap curtain. I imagined seams opening, light bleeding through. Around 11:30, I gave up on pretending. I turned the couch toward the door and sat with my laptop balanced on my knees, all the apartment's lights off, except the soft glow of the screen. The rule sheet on the fridge caught that glow faintly, white card in a black room. The AC cycled harder. My skin prickled with the kind of dry cold that isn't weather but machine. A low hiss pushed out of the vent. Then another noise, smaller, inside the bathroom. A rattle, metal against tile. I got up with the laptop still in my hand. The towel over the bathroom mirror hung straight, undisturbed, but the edge at the bottom had loosened, just a centimeter of glass showing, enough to catch the glow from my screen. And in that inch of reflection, a shape behind me. I spun, but the doorway was empty. The couch, the table, nothing else. My chest hammered anyway. I lifted the towel and pressed it flat again, but the glass was already fogging with condensation even though the air felt bone dry. The fog spread fast until a full handprint formed. Small, narrow fingers, pressed from the inside. I staggered back into the living room. The blanket over the big mirror swayed as if someone brushed it walking past. The clips creaked. The AC roared, higher pitch, like it was pulling more than air. My mouth tasted metallic, the way pennies taste if you bite one. I touched the blanket, half expecting something to push back. Nothing, just the faint damp where fabric shouldn't be damp. I forced myself to check again in the bathroom. The towel still hung, heavy with moisture now. The fogged handprint smeared slowly down the glass as if sliding under gravity. When it reached the edge, it left a drip of water that pattered onto the sink. But the drop smelled wrong. Acrid, chemical, pool chlorine sharpened with rust. I grabbed another towel and pressed it hard across the mirror. Layered two this time, clipped the corners, hands shaking. The glass thudded faintly under my palms, like something knocking back once. When I shut the bathroom door, the hinges screamed louder than they should have. I shoved the laundry basket against it, sat on the couch with every light back on, staring at the blanket-covered wall. Minutes crawled. The hum of the building pressed in. Somewhere above, a pipe rattled in rhythm, tinny, irregular. I told myself it was plumbing. I told myself mirrors sweat when the air's wrong. But the chlorine taste stayed in my throat long after the AC cut off. And when I finally worked up the nerve to peel the blanket back at dawn, the mirror was perfectly clean. No fog, no stain, only the faintest mark at child height. 5 blurred ovals, as if someone had leaned there with a damp hand and waited for me to notice. I left the blanket up anyway. The rule card didn't say how long the new moon lasted, and I wasn't ready to test the math. Elena came uninvited. It was 11:50 p.m. when I heard the muted scrape of a master key. The door chain held, but the gap showed her pale face, hair pulled so tight the scalp looked painful. Nitrile gloves still on like she hadn't finished her shift. She hissed, quick. When I slid the chain, she slipped inside, dripping condensation from her sleeves as if she'd walked through mist. She carried a thin notebook inside a clear zip bag, smelled of citrus cleanser. And something burnt. Plastic in the air that hadn't come from my unit. She pressed the notebook against my chest like contraband. Inside, rows of names, unit numbers, dates. Everyone cut short, some at 90 days, most around 119. The last line, Kyle M. 6B, 119 nights. Her thumb twisted the glove cuff until it squealed. You see? Always the same? I flipped pages. Water-smudged handwriting that still told the same story. People timed out. No checkouts. No refunds. No reviews that stayed online. Before I could answer, a metallic cough shook the ceiling. Then another. A wheeze pump wheeze, like old lungs struggling. A hiss followed, and suddenly the sprinklers came alive. Warm spray, not cold, hit my scalp and shoulders. The taste of chlorine and iron filled my mouth. The floor darkened. Elena hunched over the notebook, shielding it, while red strobes from the fire alarms smeared across the walls. I thought, real fire. Then I smelled it, burnt plastic, not wood. Synthetic, wrong. The pump above us rattled again. The sprinkler jets spat unevenly, half sputtering. This wasn't a fire drill. This was a system cycling on its own. And then came the knock. 3 raps, measured, calm. Too calm for a fire evacuation. Then laughter, high-pitched, running both directions in the corridor. Children, overlapping, giggling. Elena flattened herself to the wall, lips moving in prayer. I crept to the peephole. All I saw was fog from the sprinkler mist, drifting like smoke. Still, the exit sign down the corridor flickered in sync, as if unseen feet were stepping beneath it. I yanked my tea card from the counter. My fingers shook, slippery from spray. I shoved it into the reader. Red blink, again. Red. The card's tiny LCD blinked. Expired. I stared dumbly. Elena grabbed my wrist. Don't touch the handle, she rasped. The microwave clock glitched in the corner. Rosette digits flashing. 2:12. The same time stamped in the notebook margins. Something tugged at the handle from the outside. Soft, like a child testing, then releasing. Another knock. Deliberate. The sound of someone who knew I was standing right there. The pump wheezed above, stuttered, then shut down mid-cycle. Water stopped raining. The silence was too quick, unnatural. I could hear droplets sizzling faintly on hot metal overhead. The air stank of scorched wires. Helena snatched the keycard from me and jabbed a finger at the tiny fine print I'd never noticed. Valid 120 nights. Always the same. They don't leave, they time out. Her gloves squeaked wet against my wrist. My head throbbed. Pressure in my ear, like that cabin descent dream again. The exit sign flickered one last time, in rhythm with steps I couldn't see. Then darkness. I looked down at the notebook. Ink bled through from the sprinkler water. The last entry smeared but legible. Kyle M. 119. I counted without meaning to. This was my 13th night. Richard didn't answer my texts. At noon, I went hunting. The maintenance office was tucked behind the laundry chute access on the lobby level. Just a frosted door with staff only on vinyl. When I knocked, it opened 2 inches, chain-latched. His eye appeared, bloodshot, wary. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. I shoved the soaked notebook against the glass. "This building's killing tenants. 13 nights, Richard. I'm already on 13. The chain slipped. He pulled me inside, locked 3 bolts in quick succession. The office smelled of ozone and grease, like an overheated breaker room. Ceiling fans spun lazy, blades furry with dust. He sat me at a desk littered with blueprints folded to creases, binders with hazard-taped spines, and a laptop glowing pale green. "You didn't hear this from me," he said. His Torx driver clicked against his palm, rhythm fast, sharp. "Officially, we have quarterly maintenance. Thermal purge. 2 a.m. through close to 4. All vents and exhaust cycle at full burn. Kills mold, sterilizes ducts, keeps ratings 5-star. That's the line corporate feeds. And unofficially, he tapped a key. On screen, maint log, thermal purge. Next, 2:12 to 3:48. Under notes, cycle not to be interrupted." I read it twice, ears filling with that airplane descent ache again. My skin prickled with sweat, though the room was cold. Richard's eyes flicked to the ceiling cam in the corner. "We don't linger here at night. Doors locked, vents sealed, that's all I can tell you." His hand shook, the Torx rattled louder. "Then why show me this?" His jaw worked. He closed the binder, slid it toward me anyway. Inside, schematic cross-sections of the building. Pipes, shafts, a fat rectangle labeled B1, Service, Thermal Unit. Basement level. When my finger touched the print, the laptop chimed. A window bloomed. Elevator 2. It showed a woman in a gray hoodie, hair tied up. She swiped her card, stepped in, pressed B1. The camera angle caught her face as she turned. It was me. Not similar, not close. Me in the same clothes I was wearing. Black joggers, white t-shirt, hair damp from the sprinkler event. Richard's knuckles whitened on the desk. I lifted my hands. "I'm right here." On screen, I adjusted the hood and looked straight at the camera. Direct, intentional. The feed pixelated, lines of ozone static scrolling down, but the face stayed intact. The eyes were flat black, then smile. Slow, stretched too wide, but still mine. The elevator doors shut. A counter ticked. B1 arrived. "Shut it off," I whispered. Richard didn't move. He was staring at his Torx like it might anchor him. The monitor crackled louder. Smell of burnt plastic rose filling the office. Through the speakers, faint, like someone breathing right next to the mic. "Don't," Richard rasped. "Don't ever go down there. That's not your floor." On screen, the fake me leaned close, face almost touching the lens. Teeth glinted. My own teeth. Then the feed cut to white static. I realized my palms were bleeding. Nails dug in so hard half-moons had broken skin. The taste of iron was in my mouth. Sharp, metallic, like the sprinkler water, but stronger, closer. I stood. The blueprint was still under my hand, the thick paper soft with sweat. At the center, bold letters burned through the fog of static memory. B1, Service, Thermal Unit. Rule 5 echoed in my head. Do not go to the basement. The first 4 rules had felt negotiable, superstition you could test. But now the basement had a face. My face. And it smiled. The USB had more on it. I hadn't opened the smaller files before, too afraid of what might be left. After seeing myself step into an elevator I hadn't touched, I plugged it back in. 6 files total. The newest I'd watched already, Bouncing Ball. 2:29 a.m. The next was labeled only, audio_03. I clicked. At once, the shriek of a fire alarm tore through my headphones, a tone so sharp it needled behind my eyes. Over it, someone whispering. Voice raw, close to the mic. Don't let it use your fear. The alarm drowned the rest. Then the file cut. My skin crawled. I yanked the headphones off, convinced I could still hear the alarm bleeding faintly into the room. The clock read 12:54. Right on cue, a knock sounded. 3 sharp taps, measured. My stomach bottomed out. Then a voice, muffled through the door. Kyle's. Maya, it's me. You found my case, right? Let me in. I went rigid. I hadn't said his name aloud, but I knew it. Kyle M., written on the luggage tag, the last entry in Elena's notebook. He knocked again, harder this time. Please, you have to let me in before the purge starts again. Behind me, the bathroom door rattled softly. Pipes clicked, a low whir built under the floor, like a machine idling. From the hallway, another sound joined, low, quick chanting. I pressed my ear to the door. Elena's voice, unmistakable, murmuring rapid Ave Maria in Spanish over and over. She was out there, with him. The knocks grew frantic, then stopped. I leaned to the peephole. Kyle stood in the corridor. His clothes matched what I'd found in the suitcase. Shoulders hunched, hands out. But his face, nothing. Smooth, pale skin, like the render of a mannequin unfinished. A head with features erased. My throat closed. I staggered back, heart hammering. The chanting outside rose louder, then cut off. Silence. Inside the unit, the sound I'd been ignoring swelled. A deep mechanical rotation. Floor vibrating under my bare feet. It came from the bathroom. I pushed the door open. The towels over the mirror dripped steadily, damp spreading across the tile. The laundry basket I'd braced against the door had shifted, as if nudged from inside. And beneath it all, the industrial rhythm of a washer drum, a heavy whump-whump-whump rolling from the pipes behind the wall. There was no washer in the bathroom. This was a service department. The only machines were in the basement laundry. Still, the floor trembled with each cycle. Water hissed somewhere in the drain, hot metal scent rising like steam. I backed into the living room. The knocks hadn't resumed. The hallway was quiet as death. Then the unit's light fixtures buzzed. Each one dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. A syncopated rhythm, like they were pulsing in time with the washer. My ears ached again. That same descent pressure, except now the air vibrated with it. I pressed my palms against the sides of my head. But the sound still resonated, deep as bone. The fire alarm tone from Kyle's audio looped inside my memory, as if my body remembered it even though the file was closed. Don't let it use your fear. But fear was all I had left. I shoved another blanket against the bathroom door and sat with my back against the couch, laptop still open to the corrupted audio file. It had no metadata, no date, no time, only the name, audio_03. Somewhere under my feet, the washer spun faster, whump-whump rising toward a shriek like a turbine winding up. I clenched my eyes shut. Every instinct begged me to run, but rule number 5 had already shown me what waited in the basement. And if Kyle was at my door without a face, then he hadn't made it to 120 either. The building had found another sound to haunt me with, and this one never stopped cycling. Elena came back smelling of smoke before there was any. She knocked fast, 3 short bursts, and when I cracked the door, she shoved inside. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying or breathing fumes. Her gloves were on, slick with citrus, but her whole uniform reeked of burned plastic. "You need to hear this," she said. Her hands shook. She paced the small living room, then braced against the counter, fighting to get the words out. 10 years ago, this place, different name then, new branding now, they ran a purge cycle wrong. System locked itself. Sprinkler failed to vent. Alarm never stopped. Fire started in the laundry units downstairs. Staff got trapped. She swallowed. We pulled bodies out of machines, burned into the drums. They said accident. Corporate settled. NDA for everyone on shift. We signed. We had to. Her thumb twisted the cuff of her glove until it squealed. Her eyes darted to the mirror still covered in blanket, then to the ceiling vent. You think the purge is cleaning ducks? It cooks them. It cooks us. Every quarter. If the system wants you, it doesn't stop. Doesn't matter the signatures, doesn't matter the settlements. Before I could answer, the air shifted. A sharp tang hit the back of my throat, like plastic melting on a stove coil. The sprinkler in the ceiling rattled, coughed, then burst alive. Hot water this time, scalding, not lukewarm. It splattered across my arms, stung like needles. Steam fogged the room instantly. The notebook pages I'd left on the counter warped, ink bleeding. Elena screamed, covering her head. The hallway alarm strobed red through the peephole, painting the steam crimson. We pressed against the wall as the unit filled with mist. My skin prickled, each droplet biting. The smell was suffocating, synthetic, caustic, like breathing from inside a burning circuit board. The elevator bell dinged. Through the door, down the hall, the chrome doors opened with a hiss. No one stepped out. But the stainless panels bore marks. Black handprints, smeared, charred outlines burned into the metal like branding irons. I couldn't move. Elena whimpered, shaking harder now. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a small keyring. A dozen blanks, but one longer, brass, tagged B1. She shoved it into my hand. "Take it," she gasped. The metal seared against my palm, almost hot. I clenched before I could think. Then she snatched it back with a cry, clutching it to her chest. "No. You don't want that. You don't ever want that." Her whole body trembled. "I saw what's down there once. I can't unsee it. Don't ask me again." The sprinkler sputtered, then died, leaving us dripping, steam curling up like smoke from corpses. Elena leaned against the counter, soaked gloves dripping, eyes locked on the blanketed mirror like she expected something to push through. I stared at my palm where the key had pressed. The skin was red, welted in the shape of its teeth. It throbbed even after the metal was gone. Somewhere down the hall, the elevator dinged again. Doors opening, doors closing, nobody riding. Elena whispered, "They don't repair the scars. They just rename the building and wait for the next cycle." And I believed her. Richard was waiting in the gym. I hadn't expected him to call, but a folded note had been shoved under my door sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. Just one line in his blocky handwriting, "Meet me by the mirrors." The fitness room was empty, lit only by half the fluorescents. Machines sat dark, smell of rubber mats and disinfectant sharp in the air. Along the far wall, a stretch of floor-to-ceiling mirrors taped in X's from past cracks, silvering peeling at the edges. Richard stood with his Torx driver in one hand like it was a weapon. He didn't turn when I entered. His reflection did, though. "I saw it here first," he said. His voice scraped. 3 cycles back. Tenet was running. Treadmill, music blasting. I was checking the breaker. The mirror. He jabbed the Torx toward the glass. Something reached. Took him. No scream. Just gone. Machine kept running. He finally looked at me. Eyes wild. The ceiling fluorescence buzzing above. Corporate wrote it up as medical. Cardiac arrest. NDA signed. Unit scrubbed in 12 hours. The air tasted metallic. Chlorine, faint but present, like it leaked through vents whenever he spoke the truth. I turned toward the bathroom attached to the gym. The mirror there had been covered, but the towels were sagging now, soaked from steam. A hairline fracture cut across the glass. It dripped, not condensation, but dark rivulets that stained the tile. The smell hit, ash and wet concrete like water doused over a fire long dead. I pressed my palm close. The drip was warm, gritty, not water at all. Slurry of soot. Richard swore under his breath. He pulled a laminated calendar from his back pocket, edges worn. He slapped it against the wall. Every 3 months, dates highlighted. Quarterly purge. Tenants vanish on cycle, always. Names off the system. Locks reset. And if you live long enough to notice, his driver clicked fast in his hand, a staccato beat. They let the mirrors finish the job. The crack in the glass widened with a soft groan. From the fissure, steam bled, curling black against the white tiles. The fluorescent above us flickered, throwing shards of light across the reflective wall. I caught my own outline bending wrong. Shoulders hunched lower, head tilting at an angle my body hadn't moved. "Don't look," Richard hissed, grabbing my arm. "It feeds on that." But my eyes were already locked. The fracture spread like a spiderweb. Beyond it, a corridor, darker than the gym, same layout but inverted. Emergency lights burned a dull red in that other space. Shadows moved, not matching mine. The slurry hit the drain with a hiss, black streaks snaking outward. The tile floor trembled under my shoes, as if that hallway beneath the glass had weight, mass, pressure pushing through. Something stepped closer from the other side. I couldn't see its face. I only saw the shine of wet floor under bare feet, the sound of liquid dripping heavier with each step. The crack bulged. The mirror surface pulsed like stretched skin. Richard yanked me back. The driver clattered to the floor. It's not reflection anymore. It's a door. The glass shuddered once, twice, then stilled. The dripping slowed. Only the spiderweb crack remained, wet and black, like veins. I dragged air into my lungs. It smelled of soot and chlorine, a mix that stuck in the throat. Richard picked up his driver, eyes avoiding the mirror entirely. "Rule number 3's not about vanity," he muttered. "It's containment. Once the glass opens, you can't close it." I stared at the dripping fissure, the faint outline of a hallway that wasn't ours. And I knew there were tenants still walking in it. Elena didn't show up for shift the next morning. Her cart sat in the hallway outside 6B, mop still damp, gloves draped across the handle like she'd stepped away mid-task. The notebook she always carried was on top. Pages warped from sprinkler water, open to a dog-eared sheet. In her shaky pen, 120 nights, always 120. I called her name down the corridor. Only the buzz of the exit sign answered. By evening, the air had shifted again. Thick, metallic, hot. Like the ducts were blowing furnace breath instead of AC. My phone buzzed against the counter. A push notification, banner read, maintenance cycle active, 2:12 to 3:48. I felt the pressure immediately. Ears clogging, throat scratchy. The taste of chlorine rose sharp like I'd swallowed pool water. The vents above hissed. From the bathroom, a drip echoed, steady as a metronome. My palms went clammy. I opened the apartment app, tapped into the camera feeds I'd sworn I'd never check again. Unit 6B, bedroom. The screen filled with a view of my own bed and me in it. Blanket pulled to the chin, hair across my cheek, breathing slow, chest rising, asleep. Except I was standing at the counter watching myself sleep on a screen. My stomach turned. I stepped closer, phone trembling in my hand. On screen, the other me stirred. The blanket slipped, one arm sprawled out, pale in the dim light. The camera mic picked up sound, breath deep and rhythmic, but under it a whisper. "Stay in bed. Stay still." The app glitched, stuttered, then jumped. Now the camera angle dipped closer as if the device had been moved, tilted down toward the bed frame. The dark void beneath it filled the feed, pixels swimming. Something shifted there. Blacker than shadow. I froze. My ears popped with a sharp crack, the cabin descent ached, drilling through sinuses. On screen, a hand slid into view. Too thin. Too long. Fingers dragged over the floorboards, nails clicking like glass. The hand reached upward, toward the arm of the sleeping me. The phone shook in my grip. My real throat constricted, breath choking. Then cold brushed my skin. Not from the phone, not from the vent, from behind me. Fingers, clammy and wet, grazed the side of my neck. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the tile. The screen stayed lit, showing the hand under the bed curling tighter around the arm of the sleeping me. but the pressure on my actual throat grew. Invisible weight, pressing, testing, like hands that weren't there but absolutely were. My vision shimmered, black edging in. I stumbled, clawed at my own skin. My nails left welts, but the grip didn't release. The room tilted. The exit sign in the hall flashed through the peephole, painting everything red. On the floor, my phone buzzed again. A second alert. Maintenance cycle. In progress. The feed distorted. Two versions of me filled the screen now. One asleep, one standing at the counter exactly as I had been seconds ago. Both frozen, both flickering. The hand under the bed dragged harder. The sleeping me's head lolled, and for an instant, I felt my own body slack, like something was pulling me into that feed, making me switch places. I slammed both palms against the counter, gasping. The grip vanished all at once. Air tore into my lungs so sharp it burned. The phone skittered against the floor. Screen cracked. Feed gone to static. I stared at the dark bedroom doorway, terrified I'd see myself step through. Instead, silence pressed in. Just the hiss of the vent, just the throb in my ears. Elena's notebook still lay on the cart outside. I could picture her handwriting, that line circled again and again, 120 nights. And I knew I wasn't even halfway through. Richard found me in the stairwell at midnight, clutching Elena's ruined notebook like it was a Bible. His shirt was soaked with sweat, torque still in his hand. He didn't ask if I was okay, he just said, "We end it tonight." The keycard he used bypassed the lobby panel with a tired beep. We took the service elevator down. Every floor we passed reeked stronger. Burned lint, old detergent, charred plastic. B1. Basement. The doors opened into black. The flashlight on my phone cut a narrow beam. The space was enormous, unfinished concrete sweating damp. Steel pipes lined the ceiling, dripping. The air was a kiln, dense, baked, pressing heat. On the far wall hung a round clock, the hands frozen at 2:29. Dust had settled in thick layers over the glass, but the time was clear. Richard tapped his driver against his thigh, a frantic metronome. Every purge stops here. Clock never resets. The floor crunched under our shoes. Ash, brittle lint, something sharp that clung. My lungs pulled hot air in that tasted like burned dryer sheets. Then the sound began. At first, just a single knock, hollow, metallic, somewhere in the dark. Another joined, a beat off. Then another, higher pitched like knuckles on a pipe. The flashlight beam jittered as my hand shook. Shadows pressed against the edges of the circle of light. Then came laughter, thin, piping. Children, echoing down the ductwork, followed by the shriek of a fire alarm bleeding through walls. Schnuck. Knock, knock, knock. The sounds layered, building into a rhythm that didn't fit human timing. My ears filled, cabin pressure pain stabbing deep. Heat surged. The temperature spiked like an oven door opening. Sweat slicked my neck, rolled into my collar. Richard swore, stepped back. The washer units along the wall clicked. One by one, their digital displays flickered green. 212, 219, 223. All cycling, all active. The nearest washer drum spun with a dry, scraping whump, whump, whump. The door shook, then slammed open. Heat blasted out, choking. Something stepped through, small, soot-caked. A child-sized figure, hair burned away, skin blistered black. Eyes white and blind but staring straight. Then another, and another. Crawling, staggering, spilling out of every machine door that burst wide. Their limbs twitched with the rhythm of the drums. Joints jerking too fast, too slow, like they were still caught mid-cycle. One opened its mouth. No scream, just the shrill whine of the fire alarm, pouring straight from its throat. Richard grabbed my arm. "Don't let them touch you. They don't stop once they do." I lifted the phone. Its camera whined with feedback, ozone crackling. On the screen, their shapes blurred, multiplied. A dozen burned children, eyes like boiled glass, faces cracked in permanent smiles. They stepped closer in unison, gaze fixed not on me, but on the phone. I realized too late, I was recording. The screen filled with white static, but the camera kept drawing them forward. like it was bait. Richard slapped the phone out of my hand. It skidded across the floor, clattering into the ash. The children stopped, all heads turning at once, following the sound. The washer drums still spun, the heat still built, my chest compressed, each breath shallower, as if the air itself was pulling away. The figures took another step, bare feet hissing against the concrete. Steam curled from their bodies, mixing with the hot ozone stink until my vision blurred. One raised its hand, skin peeling, fingers black, and reached for me. Richard shoved me back against the wall, raising his torques like it was enough to fight with. And in that moment, I realized every washer in the row was opening, one after another, until the basement was full of them. They didn't make sound now, they just stared, and all of them looked straight into my lens. I thought the heat would ease when we pulled the basement door closed behind us. It didn't. It clung, skin, clothes, lungs. Even back on 6, my throat burned like I'd swallowed chlorine. Richard had vanished somewhere between the stairwell landing and the door to 6B. One moment his Torx driver clicked in his hand, the next I was alone, his sweat-dark shirt sleeve slipping out of view into smoke that hadn't followed me upstairs. That was the moment I understood. There was no leaving the building without understanding what it wanted. Not fire drills, not sprinklers, not keys. It wasn't burning anything clean. It was collecting. Elena's notebook lay damp on my counter, sprinkler water bloating the paper. The page she'd bookmarked was smeared but still legible. List tenants, record names, keep cycle. I sat with the recorder Kyle had left in his suitcase. Cheap plastic, silver buttons worn smooth. I clicked read, leaned close, and read every name. Unit 5C, Chen David. Unit 7A, Lopez Marissa. The names came out raw, throat cracked, chlorine sting at the back of my sinuses. Every syllable echoed like I was shouting into ductwork. The emergency lights stuttered overhead. Not the normal cycle, these flickered in patterns, pulses timed like breath. For a second I thought it was the building correcting me, pushing air through fans. Then the recorder hissed back. Not static. A crowd clearing their throats. I pushed on. Unit 2F, Kyle Martin. The hiss pitched up, the recorder's little red LED jumped like a heartbeat. In the walls, pipework rattled. Above me, glass cracked, a mirror I'd covered hours ago pulling loose from its tape. By the time I reached Elena's name, my ears were ringing like cabin descent. My jaw ached as though the pressure was inside bone. I pressed the recorder tighter. Unit B1, Staff, Elena Torres. The lights cut. Not a power drop. The emergency housings all burst in sequence, glass raining down. For a heartbeat, the hallway was pure dark except for the LED on the recorder. And in the dark, the voices answered. Not one, not many. All of them, bent together into a sound too thick to separate. Men, women, children, staff, guests, a wave, rolling straight into my inner ear. I dropped the recorder, but the sound didn't stop. The red LED on the floor still pulsed in time with my own pulse. They weren't screaming. They were rehearsing. Each phrase rolled over me, repeated like a choir learning lines. My throat locked, ribs seizing, because they were using my breath to keep rhythm. Tell them. The recorder spat the words clean, louder than the others. Tell them we were here. I pressed both palms against my ears. Blood ran warm between my fingers. It didn't help. The words didn't need the air anymore. They were inside the pressure itself, pressing from skull to spine, riding the static in every vent. Every mirror surface in the unit thrummed against drywall. In the bathroom, steam rose though the taps weren't on. Kitchen chrome sweated droplets black with soot. The glass I'd covered with towels swelled out, pushed from the other side, seams groaning like ribs cracking. The choir surged again, this time not a message, but a weight. Syllables hammering like washer drums. Tell them we were here. Tell them. Tell them. I scrambled for the recorder, but it was already working without me, light dancing red on its own. The voices had learned the machine. I clutched it to my chest anyway, and every bone inside me rattled as though it was dragging my heartbeat into their timing. I didn't black out. I wished I had. Instead, I sat hunched against the cabinet, ears bleeding, chest aching, while every name from Elena's list poured back through that single tiny speaker. Voices stacked, harmonized, until language bent into pressure and the pressure bent into a demand. Tell them we were here. The LED blinked twice, then steady. The building exhaled, the mirrors fell silent. The taste left in my mouth wasn't chlorine anymore, it was soot. And the recorder was still running. I woke to silence. Not the quiet of comfort, but the kind that follows alarms after the machinery shuts off and leaves only the taste of its exhaust. My throat was raw from shouting names I hadn't meant to own. The sheets under me were gritty with soot that no cycle of laundry would take out. The hallway beyond my door looked sterilized. No knock, no laugh, no thud of a ball rolling. The exit sign over the stairwell glowed steady green, no longer in sync with invisible footsteps. The mirrors were dry. Richard was gone. His Torx driver lay on the floor outside 6C, a dot of rust spreading on the chrome tip as if it had been left there for decades. Elena didn't come back either. Her glove cuff still hung twisted from the laundry chute door where she'd braced herself the night before, but there was no sign of her inside. When I checked my keycard, the LCD didn't read expired. It read valid, 120 days remaining. The system had already renewed me. I wanted to scream, but the ducks hummed as if they'd just cleared their throat, reminding me that the building never liked raised voices. On the counter, the USB from Kyle blinked a faint red pulse. I hadn't left it plugged in. The file that booted automatically wasn't the hallway clip this time. It was audio only. Kyle's voice fractured, buried under static, words chewed by the same machinery that had eaten him. Unless someone tells the story. Then nothing, just the sound of washers cycling in the distance. I closed the lid, but the audio kept bleeding through the laptop speakers, low enough that it felt like my own lungs were vibrating with it. The cursor on the screen blinked inside a blank document, each pulse in rhythm with the ache in my ears. That was when I understood. The purge didn't end, it paused. And survival wasn't escape, it was inheritance. The USB didn't ask politely. It dragged my hands onto the keyboard, the pads of my fingers tacky with soot. Letters stamped onto the white page, the smell of hot toner burning into the air though no printer was running. Welcome to Unit 6B. Follow these rules. I typed it because I had no choice, because if I didn't, the ducts would start hissing again, and the chlorine would eat my lungs raw. The system wanted a log, a testimony, a continuous record that threaded each tenant into the next. The mirrors across the living room reflected only the cursor, glowing like a trapped firefly, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The cursor blinked, but I swore the blink came half a second late, as though the reflection were no longer keeping up with me. Like it was waiting to take over if I paused too long. My laptop fan whirred louder. The sound merged with the low rumble from the basement, a pressure that made the glass in the windows tremble. I smelled ozone, then hot dust, then nothing at all, just a hollow air, as if the ducts had stripped every molecule that could carry life. I wrote faster. Rule 1. Do not leave your unit between 2:12 and 3:48 a.m. Rule 2. If the door knocks after midnight, do not open it. Rule 3. Cover the mirrors at night. Rule 4. If you hear children, don't follow. Rule 5. Do not go into the basement. I wrote them exactly as they'd been handed to me because that's what the cycle demanded. Accuracy, obedience, continuity. When I reached the end, the cursor didn't wait. It jumped to the next line, blinking, hungry. The reflection in the mirror wall behind me now showed more than the screen. It showed a crowd. Shoulders pressed tight, faces burnt black and split, eyes white as boiled glass. They were all watching, leaning close to the glass. None of them knocked. None of them whispered. They only waited. The ducks rattled once, sharply, like a pen clicking. I didn't stop typing. I couldn't. The system had already taken me in. And somewhere in the walls, the recorder from last night was still running. The building doesn't care if you believe the rules. It only cares that you repeat them. Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Dr. Noctis for more horror stories from the dark.